Wow, it got quiet pretty quick there. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Jeff Allen. I am the interim director of the Strom Thurmond Institute, and as such, I am at least partially in charge of this Calhoun lecture series, and I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I was talking to Dr. Leap a little bit earlier. I never know if it's better to have bad weather or good weather. But I guess people can make excuses. If it's raining, you want to, you look outside and say, oh, should we go to that lecture tonight? No, it's raining. But if it's really nice, you look outside and say, should we go to that lecture tonight? Oh, well, it's such a beautiful night. Why don't we do something else? So I really appreciate everyone coming out here tonight. And tonight is our third lecture of this academic year and our final lecture of the season. And it is the William H. Hunter Endowed lecture, named after Dr. Bill Hunter, who basically started this lecture series many years ago, and we're very fortunate that he did that, and we are trying to carry on his legacy through this event, and we're very proud to have Jane Hunter with us tonight, and we thank you for coming and supporting us once again, as you usually do. Like I said, this is the last lecture of our season. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Edwin Leap here with us tonight to give the talk. Rather than giving kind of the normal reading out of the program introduction, you can all read that and see that he is perhaps the most famous alum of the Marshall Thundering Herd, very proud West Virginian. Beyond that, many of you know that he writes a regular column in the Greenville News, which I always find very refreshing. I'm kind of a newspaper hound, and I do enjoy. We were again talking over dinner about sometimes how all of the political stuff can just get you down and get you ornery, but I actually enjoy reading a lot of that stuff. But I certainly enjoy reading Dr. Leap's column because it's usually very lighthearted and full of life. And I always enjoy that. I do have a little bit of a connection with Dr. Leap, and I'm sure there are just thousands and thousands of people in this upstate area that say that because people go to the emergency room and he's the guy that they run into, and so they feel this bond with him. I don't know that he necessarily feels that bond with all the thousands of people that come through there every day. But certainly just about 10 years ago, our oldest son, we were coming home from a camping experience where, of course, we had been out in the woods where there were lots of snakes and things. And in fact, I had been teasing all of the kids. We were with two other families that had young kids, and our son was about 11 years old at the time, and I'd been teasing all of these kids. In fact, it was two families from Michigan. And I'd been teasing them about all of the dangerous South Carolina snakes. And so they were gingerly running around the campground, wondering where these snakes were hiding and if they were going to get bitten. And their parents were giving me a hard time for teasing the kids so much. So what happened that evening is we came home, we jump out of the car. Our oldest son, who was 11 at the time, was barefoot, and he jumped on top of a copperhead. And of course, my wife and I freaked out. We ended up going to the emergency room, and Dr. Leap got things all settled, and our son obviously survived, and he's doing wonderfully today. So we're eternally grateful to Dr. Leap for that. So without further ado, I know you don't want to hear me speak anymore. I would like to introduce to you Dr. Edwin Leap.
Well, I want to thank you for having me here tonight. What a great honor and what a privilege to talk to all of you. And what a nice reception beforehand for that my wife and I, children and I got to attend. I came tonight wanting to speak about something medical, something that would encourage physicians, something that would give us some insight into the future of medicine, how we can make it better for aspiring physicians. And that's my topic tonight. But what I do want to say is it's always nice to do something like this, to speak to an audience, to be around people, and to be around a group of people who are neither bleeding nor asking me for Percocet. That's a great gift to be here and to know that no ambulance is going to deliver a patient on a stretcher through the back door in a hurry. What a lovely thing to have a night like that. As you know, I'm an emergency physician at Oconee Medical Center. I've been there, I think it's 19 years now, or somewhere in that range. But before I go on, let me tell you about my path to medicine, because it's sort of relevant, and it gives some credibility to the things I want to say. I was a bad science student in high school. I will tell you that straight up. I did not intend in any way to go into medicine. In fact, I can remember in chemistry class with Mr. Shoemaker when we tried to make nitroglycerin, and it wouldn't blow up. And I said, that was all for me. If we can't make the nitroglycerin blow up in the science class, I do not want to continue with science. So I decided I would be something else. I went to Marshall University, where I met my lovely wife in the front row here, and I majored in journalism. But journalism just didn't work for me. I was not captivated by it. Oddly enough, I loved to write, but it didn't grab me. Through some coercion by my mother and some divine providence, I ended up going into medicine, or at least trying to go into medicine at that point. I had to work hard. I had to struggle to get through the requisite science classes, to pass all of those classes, to take the medical college admissions test, to do the things necessary to go into medicine. Obviously, I managed to do that. If you don't believe in miracles, I'll tell you, there's one. I went to West Virginia University to medical school. I won't bring that up here because I know that most people won't be very happy with me because that's where I went. And, well, there was that whole bowl game incident. After medical school, I went to Methodist Hospital of Indiana to do an emergency medicine residency for 3 years. And from there, oddly enough, through other circuitous paths, we ended up here in Seneca, South Carolina to practice, and I've been here happily ever since then. I was very fortunate as a pre-medical student because no one at any point in my pre-medical education attempted to discourage me from being a physician. No one took me aside and fussed at me and said you shouldn't do that. Sadly, I speak to Clemson students who want to go to medical school all the time. And the one common theme I hear from them is, they tell me not to do it. What do you think? Doctors tell me I shouldn't go to medical school, Dr. Leap. What do you think? They'll say things like, don't go to medicine, it's terrible. Well, I can say, no, it isn't. Don't go into medicine, go into law. That's where the money is. Well, evidence suggests that's not true either. You'll hate your life. Well, only if you make very bad decisions. So when I meet aspiring physicians, I don't discourage them. I tell them it's a great career. I tell them it's full of depth and challenges and meaning. And I tell them that my career has been a source of joy and is very fulfilling. But what I don't do, ever, is sugarcoat the truth about medicine. What I don't do is lie to them, because that would be grossly unfair to people aspiring to something like medicine. I know this because my career as a physician has made some things eminently true to me. Medicine as a profession has problems, and we need to address them if we hope to continue having physicians. However, I'm not talking about the problems in medicine we usually hear about in the media. I'm not here to tell you that American medicine is bad medicine. In fact, it's very good. About 2 weeks ago, I spoke with a residency director who does work in China. He teaches ultrasound courses to the physicians there. He offered to have his entire curriculum translated into Chinese. And the physicians at the hospital said, that's great, but please don't do the cover in Chinese. Our doctors will only read it if it's in English, and it looks like it's from America. Interesting. That's a twist on popular thinking, isn't it? I submit that movie stars and political figures from around the world come here because medicine, for all its failures, is very, very good in the United States. I'm not here to discuss in any detail my views of Obamacare. That would take up our leisure time, our lecture time, and several hours afterward, and we don't have time for that. I will discuss a little bit of the economics of medicine as it applies directly to aspiring young physicians. The problems of medicine are not in any way insurmountable, but we must work on them, if only so that we can maintain an ongoing procession of fresh new faces and innovative new thinkers to fill our medical shoes as my generation of physicians and several others fade off the scene of practicing medicine. In other words, kids still need to choose medicine as a career, and we need to help them make it work. America is facing an estimated shortfall of physicians to the tune of over 20,000 doctors by 2020. That's a pretty large number. I think we need to put our heads together and make the future brighter, more attractive, and more available for aspiring physicians. And knowing that medicine is a difficult profession not only to enter but to practice, I think we can do better as practitioners, as policymakers, and as educators. First of all, I wonder sometimes if we do a good job choosing who goes into medicine. Not that the physicians we have are bad at all, but I ask myself, can we do better? Can we select more carefully for the traits we need? What traits come to mind? Among others, physicians need the ability to learn and use large amounts of information. These days, they need to be technologically adept. They need the compassion necessary to feel genuine empathy for other people in their suffering, a love of human beings, and a desire to work closely with them in difficult settings. They need discipline. They need flexibility. They need physical and emotional stamina for a career in medicine. And they need the willingness to endure the long and difficult process of medical education. So far, it has worked. Have no doubt about it. I meet pre-medical students from Clemson University all the time, and they're intelligent and they're articulate. But I suppose I wonder if we ask them to do far too many things that will not really impact their practices. Will their calculus class improve their surgical skills? I don't know. Will their memorization of biochemical cycles make them more effective radiologists? I don't know. As we face fewer and fewer physicians, both from inadequate numbers graduating and from increasing numbers retiring early, we may need to trim the process. I have suggestions here, but by no means an exhaustive list, but one thing I think we could do to educate our physicians more effectively is apprentice them, and here's how. A little-known phenomenon in medicine today is the medical scribe. You may or may not have heard of this. The scribe works for a physician and does charting. This is because so many physicians find electronic medical records to be a hindrance to productivity. In fact, in studies of electronic medical records, the productivity of physicians drops by about 30% across the board when they're employed. That's a lot. Many of the physicians who try to use it are not as facile with computers as younger people. An industry has sprung up, and that is the scribe industry, where we would hire, for instance, pre-medical students to come and work as our data entry personnel. But what an amazing thing to do that for 2 or 3 years, because you wouldn't only be entering data, you'd be learning medicine. I think pre-medical education should include appropriate scientific preparation, without doubt, but it would be dramatically enhanced by opportunities for apprenticeship, as in the scribe model. The practice of medicine, and particularly education as a physician, is about repetition and pattern recognition. Communication and people skills, and also memorization algorithms. Apprenticeships would prepare our physicians earlier and more effectively for lifelong careers of actually caring for the sick. In the process, students might find out that they don't really care for the practice of medicine, and they might learn it well before the 4 years of college and 2 years of basic sciences they undergo before they actually care for sick people. It'd be far better to learn it then than after all that tuition. The reality is that medical schools are already looking for applicants who have worked in these capacities as scribes. Clearly, they're entering their educational process ahead of the curve. And while research is lovely and important and makes a student stand out, the overwhelming majority of practitioners in medicine today are not engaged in research either clinically or in the lab. What else can we do for students? We can improve their educational plight by preparing them for the rigors of economics, the hard reality of the business of medicine. Education, both pre-medical and medical, that speaks to aspiring doctors about the glories of caring for the sick, then tells them only about their economic security, is unfair and unrealistic. Physicians need to learn that medicine is also a business, or at the very least, a kind of financial transaction, no matter who writes the check. They should have exposure to management and business classes in their pre-medical days, so they can have those concepts in mind as they consider their economic futures. The cost of the educations, balanced against their own assets and motivations, will have to be factors in the educational process. And universal health care, if passed, won't change this reality. It will only change the customer from the patient to the government. A transaction will still occur. Another issue for students aspiring to medicine is the cost of medical education. Does it matter? It certainly does. Young physicians are now exiting medical schools with debt burdens in the range of $160,000 to $180,000 for medical school alone. That doesn't factor in the amount of money they spent on undergraduate education. With the price of reimbursements falling, then the amount of money they make is really about to fall below a breaking point. They cannot continue to afford to practice with that debt burden and the amount of money they're making falling. They can't buy houses. It's difficult to have children. Sometimes even automobiles may be difficult for them. And opening innovative practices, well, that's much more difficult, especially those practices where they're business owners rather than employees, the kind of physicians we like to see who are autonomous and free-thinking. Into that mix, the likelihood they will have either inclination or capacity to afford to see indigent, unpaying patients is virtually zero. It also makes lower-paying primary care positions nearly impossible unless those positions are supplemented through loan repayments or scholarships. They simply can't afford to do that. This financial problem also explains a general trend in medicine away from call. For those unaware, specialists, especially surgical specialists, are abandoning call responsibilities in droves, leaving those of us in the emergency department to sort through medical crises and surgical crises and try to find someone to manage them, often in other towns. Physicians leave call duties not only to avoid sleeplessness and fatigue, but to avoid time spent on patients for which they will receive neither compensation nor any protection for litigation. What can we do? Well, I have an idea. Among other things, we could structure medical student loans to allow physicians to get credit toward loan repayment at a Medicare rate for every non-paying patient they see. Over a few years, they could work off that student loan debt by caring for those who don't have insurance. The same could apply to other physicians in practice, but perhaps without student loans. We could allow them to receive tax deductions based on the same formula for caring for the indigent. A simple solution, really. It would provide care and would build good feelings and rapport in the community. And many of those cared for will one day have jobs and insurance and become paying patients of those physicians who saw them in their time of medical and financial need. This has been suggested but never enacted. It appears to reward the rich. Pity. Doctors, especially the primary care providers, are fast losing their financial power, even as they're considered wealthy. For future physicians to thrive, this perception has to be addressed. Physicians, particularly in training, have all heard this argument. Don't worry about insurance payments. Don't worry about government or memberships or license or anything else. You're a rich doctor. Don't worry about your loans. You'll be fine. Coincidentally, I heard a great lecture last month entitled Life at $200,000 a Year. It was for residents who are graduating. And it broke down the cost of medical practice and life in general after residency. After that 4 years of college, that 4 years or 3 years of residency, and the 4 years of medical school. After a physician in practice pays his family's health insurance, his retirement, his disability, his licensure, his professional fees, his employees, and everything else, that $200,000 results in about $600 of free money per month before child care. Young physicians can't be overwhelmed with taxes and fees and still be treated like the filthy rich after spending 11 to 16 years on post-high school education. It won't work, and it isn't fair. After long, the glories of what we call the medical practice will fall away, and bright young students will steer away from professions where they're overwhelmed with debt, and they'll go into engineering and other technical fields. There are other things we can do to make people more likely to enter the medical profession, to make the medical profession more attractive and more pleasant. First of all, or among the other things, we have to make medicine a place where patients and physicians are reconnected. The recent debate on the contraceptive mandate raises the question of the intervention of government and in the patient-physician relationship. Some people are angry and they say that's too much intervention between that sacred bond. However, government has long been involved in this transaction. Ever since Medicare and Medicaid came to be, the arms of government regulate more and more of our medical lives, from screening tests to certification, from required labs to admissibility of patients. Government, at the local, state, and federal level, is inextricably involved in healthcare, and in far more ways than the provision of birth control. I frequently have to look at the little lady with the injury in the hospital, the retiree who has no broken bone but can barely walk because of her pain, and I have to say, "I'd love to admit you, ma'am, but Medicare simply won't pay for it. I'm very sorry. How else can we help you?" Government intervening in that patient relationship. The payer makes the rules, as it were. If we could change that formula, if individuals could make the decisions rather than government, the insurer, the employer, then some of the sanctity of our relationship with our patients would be restored. Of course, state medical boards, federal regulators like the DEA, and others all also insert themselves into this relationship. Furthermore, regulatory bodies like the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Hospital Organizations, JCAHO, while existing for noble purposes for safety, often fall down in practicality, as care providers are focused on pleasing evaluators more than caring for patients. I've seen this happen, as hospitals ramp up into a frenzy because of an evaluation visit and other things get dropped. Even our specialty boards, which exert increasing influence on the practice of medicine, are raising costs dramatically while asking more and more from physicians, even though, and this may seem shocking, no study has ever demonstrated that board certification makes a physician any better at patient care. The American Board of Medical Specialties is the body that supervises all specialty board evaluations. Last year they made $300 million. Specialties may be as much about profit as quality for the certifiers. My point is simply that many groups are part of the physician-patient equation, and as with so many equations, we need to simplify to solve. And we can do that for future physicians by asking hard questions about utility, cost, and outcomes, rather than relying on that old medical tradition of saying, well, we've always done it that way, and it worked. Maybe it worked in spite of the way we did it, because the doctors were so good and so committed that they simply made it work. But wait, there's more. For future physicians to succeed, they need to be freed from the tyranny of ideas imposed upon them by those not working at the bedside of the patient. We need to empower physicians to rise up and proclaim self-evident truth. What examples are there? Well, here's a good one. You may have heard of the customer service model of medicine. Many of you have been to hospitals and doctors' offices and been asked to fill out a patient satisfaction survey. Most physicians understand that the customer service model of medicine is perilous. While medicine itself is a business and an industry, the idea of using satisfaction surveys to determine quality of care has always been problematic. Physicians are often pressured to give medications or order tests because patients desire them or perceive that they know the right thing. Although we have to listen to our patients if we're wise and competent physicians, although they often have excellent ideas and insights, we have to be the final word. When administrators punish or threaten physicians to practice bad medicine for customer service points, there is danger afoot. A recent study in the Archives of Internal Medicine illustrates this. It suggests that physicians with higher patient satisfaction scores were having poorer patient outcomes. No surprise there. Most of us could have predicted it. Smart young physicians need a voice. We have to empower them and teach them not to roll over to top-down leadership, pardon me, but to be individualists, the patient advocates that physicians have traditionally been. We have to listen to physicians in the field. Many of us have for years protested the use of the pain scale and the general belief that physicians treated pain poorly and should give more narcotics. Those of us who said this were scoffed at and scolded. Now CDC data arrives and confirms what we believed. Patients are receiving too many narcotics and dying, as are the people who the so-called patients sell it to. And if medicine is to continue, we have to address the vast unfunded mandate of EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, passed in 1986, which crushes physicians with a mandate to see and treat everyone who presents to a hospital that accepts Medicare or Medicaid. It was a nice idea at its inception in 1986 when people were being pushed away from hospitals in times of crisis. But now, because it's an unfunded mandate, hospitals are closing, emergency rooms are closing, and specialists are leaving call responsibilities because they simply can't afford to care for over and over patients they'll never receive compensation for from the very government who mandated it. The future of medicine for aspiring doctors cannot be bright until we address the many bad ideas that have come to burden the practice of medicine today. There's another gift we can give aspiring physicians. It's the gift of leadership. Despite the rise of many allied health fields, such as physician assistants and nurse practitioners, despite their importance and contributions, the fact remains that one of our most important jobs as physicians, one of my most important jobs, is leadership and accountability. Yes, medicine is multidisciplinary and involves everyone from paramedics and home health care workers to pharmacists, physicians, and nurses. However, ultimately, at the end of the day, someone has to be in charge of the care of the patient. This is true in every profession. Combat may be multidisciplinary, but a commander has to have the final word. It matters for expediency and effectiveness and efficiency, so that care can be fluid and responsive to change. But it also matters because, like it or not, someone in every patient care transaction has to be able and willing to accept and endure blame. Few things are more evident in medicine than this fact. It is evidenced by the reality that is often startling to young physicians that every significant decision that anyone on the team makes must be verified by their signature. The physician has to sign off on it. When blame and malpractice premiums are equally shared by all stakeholders and team members, then physician leadership might dwindle, though the team would be less efficient, but not until then. Until then, it may seem unfair, it may seem arrogant for us to insist on being in charge, but we have to be. We're educated to see the global perspective, and we are treated as if we are the ones to blame. Our students might as well be educated to step up and embrace their role as leaders, unashamed and uninhibited by that burden. In addition to this, for physicians to continue practicing medicine in a healthy manner, we have to teach our young physicians the primacy of family and relationships. Tragically, there have been residency programs in America whose claim to fame was that no marriage survived the training program. How horrible. We're proud because no one's marriage ever survives this program. That's horrible. It's scandalous and it's cruel. Medicine is not the least antithetical to marriage or parenthood. It simply requires forethought and realistic expectations. The spouse of a physician, particularly one in training, can expect to spend lots of time alone. You can ask my wife about that. But with the right guidance, these couples can have creative times together and can cement their relationships through struggle in ways that ease can never accomplish. Likewise, while having children is costly and time-consuming, especially very small children don't really care what time of day or night mom or dad plays with them. They just want the time. Even the busiest physician in training or in practice can make the time for a child and a spouse if it's a priority. I'm always saddened when young physicians are told that they can have medicine or marriage, but not both. It isn't a dichotomy. I remember one time I came home and told my wife that I heard that medicine was a jealous mistress. She glared at me, and I never said it again. The look in her eyes was sufficient warning not to do that. Finally, and perhaps most important of all, in order to help future medical students, we need to give them a sense of calling, a sense of purpose. Money is one very important and very natural reason to pursue medicine. Let's not denigrate that, especially in light of the fact that our culture holds up for adulation so many who are wealthy: Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Beyonce, LeBron James, and so many others. We need not be ashamed that we work hard and do hard and often dangerous things and are rewarded. However, money is insufficient. Physicians who are entirely defined by money are typically very unhappy. I've known them down the years, and there's never enough money to pay back the time they spend, ironically, making more money. In the same way that it's a mistake to be defined by one's professional status, it is terrible to be rewarded only by money. Hippocrates' Oath, we all hear about in medical school, whether written during his lifetime or not, historians disagree, spoke to the relevance of a higher authority. It opens with, "I swear by Apollo the physician, and Asclepius and Hygeia and Panacea and all the gods and goddesses as my witness that according to my ability and judgment, I will keep this oath and this contract. That's pretty heavy. It says that physicians are accountable to more than their own selves, more than their own culture, but to a higher purpose. We're making tremendous technological strides in medicine. Students, I can tell you, pardon me, are far better at science technology than I was when I was in medical school. But so often in the Western modern educational process, we educate science and medicine students to scoff at transcendence, at objective truth, at philosophy, and at religious faith as seeming wastes of time by comparison to their science. I'll speak from experience when I say that faith may often be the only source of strength left when aspiring students face the realities of medical practice and the horrors of human inhumanity, the seeming cruelty of disease. Many of them come from very nice families and very nice educations, and the things they'll see in medicine will just shock and disarm them. I'm often asked about the worst thing I have seen. There are many, from dismembered individuals to burned ones, from abused children to murdered men, from sudden cardiac arrest to lifelong suffering from disability. Unless our young physicians have a framework within which to comprehend all this, we do them a disservice. Double-blinded studies, however well-constructed, however placebo-controlled, do not erase the terrors we sometimes see and do not offer explanations for the question why. It is entirely unfair to ask students to perform what is arguably one of the most dangerous and difficult jobs in America, to expose them to disease, sometimes to violence, to litigation, and to intensely delayed gratification, only to tell them they should make less money, work harder, follow more rules, and then deny them any possibility that their faith, their philosophy, or their meaning is silly and irrelevant. We can have materialistic physicians in the philosophical sense, but we must reward them materially. If we want physicians who are more, we must allow them a hope of something greater than mere financial transactions or nebulous societal good. Fortunately, their old mentors are on this path. In a study from the University of Chicago from 2005, 90% of physicians were people who attended religious services. It was much higher than the study designers expected. Of course, Hippocrates said it very long ago. Unfortunately, it was repeated in the 1700s by English physician Thomas Sydenham, who said, in a very beautiful quote, "It becomes every man who purposes himself to the care of others seriously to consider the four following things. First, that he must one day give an account to the supreme judge of all the lives entrusted to his care. Secondly, that all his skill and knowledge and energy as they have been given him by God, so they should be exercised for his glory and the good of mankind, and not for mere gain or ambition. Thirdly, and not more beautifully than truly, let him reflect that he has undertaken the care of no mean creature, in order that he may estimate the value and greatness of human race. The only begotten Son of God became himself a man, and thus ennobled it with his divine dignity, and far more than this, died to redeem it. And fourthly, that the doctor himself, a mortal man, should be diligent and tender in relieving his suffering patients, inasmuch as he himself must one day be a like sufferer." Isn't that beautiful? In summary, we older physicians and other professionals must not discourage young people from medicine, but encourage it as a field of endeavor. The future is short of physicians, and especially so in rural areas. There will always be work as long as there's illness and gravity, and as long as we fail to predict with absolute accuracy what may happen to us. Young people must be told their careers in medicine will have depth and purpose, meaning and joy, mixed with hard work and respect, and they will be financially rewarded for the work and responsibility that they assume. If we do not do this, if we do not use our wisdom and experience to smooth their paths, then we'll only harm ourselves, for we will all need physicians one day. We only harm future generations who lack new cures, who will lack new drugs and new procedures and fresh faces of compassion. And we may inadvertently harm our own descendants who might not find themselves suffering with no one to intervene. That would be a tragedy indeed. Thank you very much. I am told I can take questions. Is there anything you'd like to ask? Sure. I'll make it available. Absolutely. I think that it's being recorded as well. I don't know if that will be available or not. Okay, wonderful. It was a great pleasure to come tonight. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
And I just want to thank Dr. Leap again. That was excellent, very thought-provoking talk. And we do have a couple of parting gifts for you to take with you tonight as a little token of our appreciation. And I want to thank everyone for coming out again tonight. Thank you very much.